we have a panel of three distinguished gentlemen. The first one is the former UN ambassador, former Secretary of Energy, and Governor of New Mexico. I give you Governor Bill Richardson. Bill Richardson, if you would come out. Next on our panel, he's a former congressman. At the age of 20, he's accepted to Harvard Medical School. He's a Rhodes Scholar. He was Secretary of Health in Louisiana at age 24, and he was the governor of Louisiana, Bobby Jindal. Bobby? Our next individual is a former veteran. He was the Secretary of Ag for Texas. He is the longest-serving governor of Texas. And during one of his last terms of Texas, Texas produced more jobs than the other 49 states combined. I think more of my constituents have moved to his state than any other place around. I give you Governor Rick Perry.
Thank you.
Now, these three men have a lot in common. They've all been governors, they've all run for president, and they all have achieved great items and transformation in their own state. But when I look at the news today, and we all know the elephant in the room, I've got to ask it. I'm going to go to Rick Perry first. What's more difficult, Dancing with the Stars or running for president?
Kevin, thank you. Hardest thing I ever did in my life was to become a pilot in the United States Air Force in 1972 and 73. And Dancing with the Stars is just a touch under that. Running for the presidency of the United States, piece of cake compared to Dancing with the Stars. Hey, can I just take a second of my time here and just say to Bakersfield and the surrounding area what a great privilege it is for me to get to come back here. During my runs for the presidency, I'd come through here. I got to do a Lincoln Day dinner here. Made some extraordinary friends. And there's one of those friends in this audience today that I want to point out, and that is your former assemblywoman. And if you're really thinking good, she's going to be your next state senator, and that's Shannon Groves sitting right down there. That's a good woman. She reflects this part of the world really, really well. So, thank you.
I echo that, so that's very good. Now, I'd like to go to Bobby Jindal. This is an individual that when you think about it, he won in the South. He was a Rhodes Scholar at a young age. He ran the entire health system. He's a wonder child when it comes to health care. When I look at what President Clinton recently said about Obamacare, he thought it was the craziest thing. When I look and see that 16 of the 23 co-ops that were given $2 billion under this have collapsed, what do you see in the health care and Obamacare transforming in America going forward?
Well, thank you, Kevin. Before I do that, I want to echo Rick. It is a great privilege to be here. I want to thank y'all for sending Kevin McCarthy back to Congress cycle after cycle. What a great leader for not only the district, but our entire country. You know, I had the privilege of not only serving in Congress with Kevin, we were both staffers to the previous congressman. I'm not sure if he's here, but I couldn't come to Bakersfield without saying that Bill Thomas is one of the smartest and hardest working public servants I've ever met. And I want to give Bill Thomas a great round of applause as well. Kevin, you know, when it comes to health care, I will give a very backhanded compliment to President Obama. You know, when you look at Obamacare, you remember in his first 2 years in office, President Obama lost the House, he lost the Senate, he really lost the ability to get many of the other things he wanted to do. He lost the ability to get those done. I think if you had gone back in time and told him, as a new president, if you force through Obamacare on this partisan vote, you're going to lose the House, lose the Senate, you're not going to have the ability to pursue your agenda, I would argue he would still choose to push it through. He understood this was the largest expansion of government spending and power that we have seen in a generation. Now, it has, by many different measures, fallen far short of the mark and failed, whether it's his failed promise to reduce the cost of health care in America. Remember, he was going to bend the cost curve down. Remember, he told us if you liked your doctor, you could keep your doctor. If you liked your health plan, you could keep your health care plan. We could spend all day talking about the failures of Obamacare. It really is as simple as this. When you and your loved ones are sick, who do you want making those decisions? Do you want it to be the doctor in front of you, or do you want it to be a bureaucrat in Baltimore? And the reality is, I think the American people are smart enough to make their own health care decisions without the politicians in D.C. telling them, you have to buy insurance that looks like this, or you're not allowed to buy insurance that looks like that. Amen. Two things I want to say going forward. One, I was very encouraged, and I know Kevin was a big part of this, I was very encouraged to hear House leadership say one of the first things we're going to do after this election under reconciliation is once and for all repeal and replace Obamacare. I think it's one of the reasons it's so important for us to keep the House and take the Senate back. But the second thing I will say this as well, as Republicans, we can't simply just be against Obamacare. We have to be for better solutions. And I know Kevin and Paul and I have talked about that. We have better solutions. Our solutions involve making health care more affordable, more competition across state lines, more access to health savings accounts, tax deductions so you can buy your health care whether through your employer or by yourself, voluntary purchasing pools, cracking down on frivolous lawsuits, more of an emphasis on preventative care. There are several specific things we can do that restore, that not only the patient's control of our health care, but reduce the cost without putting the federal government in control. And the final thing I'll say is this. You got 3 former governors up here. Not only do the American people not need the federal government to tell us how to get our health care, states don't need the federal government dictating to us how we run our Medicaid and health care programs. Amen. It's time for D.C. to remember there's a 10th Amendment to the Constitution.
Well said.
Governor Richardson, you have a viewpoint out in the paper today. We look at the world being very unsafe. One of the driving challenges is the dictatorship in North Korea. You probably, of any other American, have the greatest knowledge and have probably traveled to North Korea more than any other American. What should the next president do dealing with North Korea to make the world a safer place?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is I promise to be bipartisan because it seems the only Democrats are here are myself and that guy in the kitchen. So I will. My second, everybody's clapping. And you gave great hands to these 2 guys that I work with as governors. You know, as governors, we have to work together. We have to balance budgets. My answer is this is probably the foreign policy issue. It's bedeviled Democrats, Republicans, President Bush, President Clinton, President Obama. How do you deal with North Korea, a country that is isolated, that has 21 nuclear weapons? We don't know anything about his leader except he only meets with Dennis Rodman and nobody else. And so it's impossible to engage in a dialogue. But I think it's important that through diplomacy, either through China, through Russia, South Korea, but really the burden will be on ourselves. I just had a delegation return from North Korea last week. I have a foundation. And I think we discovered 2 ways that possibly we can engage them. One is for them to return the Americans that are there, the detainees that are there. And I think we can do that. It's going to take a little bit of negotiating. The second is I see a lot of veterans here. You know, there are 8,000 remains of our soldiers from the Korean Wars, 8,000. And we've started to recover some. The North Koreans get funding for that. But I think if we can engage them in a way that negotiates the return, humanitarian issues, but this is an intractable problem. I think we've tried to deal with the Iran issue. The Middle East is in turmoil. This is one where it requires bipartisanship. And one of my hopes, Kevin, I think you've been good at this, is that in the House and the Senate, whatever the outcome is, We got to stop this dysfunctionality of not being able to get along. Let me close with a tribute, too, because I have a connection to Kern County, to you guys here. In New Mexico, we built Spaceport America, and you have Mojave here, and the leader at the time who helped us enormously in New Mexico was Stewie Witt. He's out here somewhere. A tough, real great administrator, and I, too, want to just send my best to Congressman. I served with Bill Thomas, with Sharon Thomas. This guy was the smartest. He was Ways and Means chairman, but boy, did he have a temper. I hope he's cooled down if you see him. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. I want to get into some domestic issues. You were all very, very successful and transformational in all your states. But in the introduction of you, Governor Perry, it was true during a portion of your tenure as governor of Texas, you produced more jobs in Texas than all the other 49 states combined. You would come to California, and I remember you just did one advertisement, and businesses would flock to you to move away from California. What is the secret, and what did you see? You even, during your tenure, became in high-tech exporting, surpassed California. What do you see the foundation of transforming Texas and making the growth for all the other states combined and us as well?
Kevin, there's actually three things that you need. I mean, it's really pretty simple. It's in rocket science. You keep the taxes as low as you can. You have a regulatory climate. Speaking of taxes, I just got my paycheck for Dancing with the Stars. What in the hell are they doing with all that money that they're taking out of our paychecks and keeping here in California, Shannon? Tax reform. Tax reform. Anyway, keeping your taxes as low as you can so that the private sector can keep more of it and make the right decisions about where to reinvest. Have a regulatory climate that's fair and predictable. Have a legal system that doesn't allow for oversuing. And I will suggest to you a fourth one that's just as important as the other three, and that is accountable educational policy so that you have the skilled workforce that you need. Those businesses, particularly in the high-tech world, didn't leave California and come to Texas if they had any concern about whether or not there was going to be the skilled workforce. They had done their homework. Toyota didn't leave out of Torrance and move their headquarters to Plano if they thought that there, for a moment, there wasn't going to be the skilled workforce. And I want to share with you one last thing that a lot of people don't think about that is a result of those policies, and a powerful one that really transformed Texas over the last 15 to 17 years, and that is the growth of the cultural arts. 20 years ago, if someone said, we're going to move the headquarters of a major company to Texas, there would have been pushback on the cultural arts side. And I'm not going to argue whether that was right or wrong, but that was just a fact. But in the last 17 years, Fort Worth built a new museum of modern art. The Basses built one of the finest symphony halls in the world. The Kimball Museum expanded its footprint by an extraordinary amount. Fort Worth has one of the most beautiful, complex zoos in the world, as does their neighbor Dallas, who, by the way, added 2 performing arts facilities during that 15-year period of time, the AT&T and the Myersons. The Perot's just finished one of the finest natural science museums in the world. Nasher moved his sculpture gardens from California to Texas. The largest geographical cultural arts district in America is in Dallas, Texas. Austin, that little government and university town that I lived in for the last 30 years, they built a new museum of modern art. They built a new performing arts facility. The only Formula One track in the United States is in Austin, Texas. San Antonio, and I might add, the largest film and music festival in the world, South by Southwest, occurs there every year. San Antonio built a new performing arts facility and opened it this last year. And in Houston, Texas tonight, as it is every night, There are more theater seats available in Houston than any other city in America outside of New York City. I make the argument that that would never have happened had we let government do it, had we relied on government to have built one of those. But because we left the private sector with more of their resources, they made the right decisions on where to give charitably, and they gave overwhelmingly to the cultural arts and to other charities, I might add. And if you want to make your state successful, don't overtax them, don't overregulate them, don't overlitigate them, and have a skilled workforce. That's all there is to it.
You know, after I heard your answer, I have second thoughts. I need some businesses to stay here, so be careful about that. You know, I've known Bobby and I actually worked together years ago, and there's no joking, he's an healthcare expert, you've heard it. But when he had his third child, the child came a little fast. Bobby actually delivered the child even before he got to the hospital. I remember that too, Bobby, you're very good. But there's one thing you did in Louisiana that I think every state should take a hold of. You transformed education. You gave school choice. And the outcome was 50% of the failing schools got off the failing list. You reached an all-time high when it came to high school graduation. I want you to talk a little bit about that and what we can do across this nation as well.
And I just want to make sure everybody understands, we didn't deliver that third child at home on purpose to save money on our health care insurance. That was first child took 36 hours of labor, second child took 24 hours of labor, third child took 30 minutes of labor. And so I'll just tell you two very quick things. I do want to spend my time talking about education choice. The dumbest thing I ever heard was people coming to congratulate me afterwards. I didn't do it. I just caught the baby. My wife did all the work. A guy came to me in church and said he had the same thing happen to him. He said, look, I had me a kidney stone. I said, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I said, unless that was like a 6-pound kidney stone, that's not the same thing as giving birth at home. That's not. But here's the last thing I'll say about it. I've been married, we're about to celebrate our 19th year of marriage next week. It'll be our anniversary, my wife and I. And I've only lied to her once. And it was August 15th when our little boy, our third and final child, was born. He's now 10 years old. She's in pain. She's delivering this baby, and she says to me, you know, because she can't see him, I'm down there, I've got the baby. She says, what does he look like? You know, it's only on TV and in movies where every baby is beautiful. In real life, there's a reason those nurses take that baby away from you very quick. You don't notice. They don't give them to you right away. They go wipe all that stuff off before they give you your precious baby. But I like being married, and I like being alive, so I told her, I said, sweetheart, he's the most beautiful baby. What I was really thinking was, he looks like your side of the family. Doesn't look like my side of the family. Going back to school choice, look, we did a lot of things in the education reform. We did tenure reform. We actually hire, fire, pay our teachers based on performance. We've done a lot of things. But the most important thing we've done, most important thing we've done is to let the dollars follow the child instead of making the child follow the dollars. Now, what does that mean in practical terms? What that means in practical terms is that every child learns differently. Some of your children will do great in traditional public schools. Some of your children will do great in charter schools or in private schools or Christian schools or parochial schools. Some children will do better in online programs or in dual enrollment programs where they take early classes from the local community college or university, or they'll do great in some kind of mixture of all of the above. Some kids will do better in homeschooling. And it makes no sense for us to fund programs instead of doing what works for each individual child. And that's what we did in Louisiana. 100% of our kids in New Orleans are now in charter schools. We actually doubled the percentage of kids doing reading and math on grade level in 5 years. Over 60% of those kids were in failing schools. Now it's less than 10%, closer to 5%. Now, I get frustrated when people tell you, just wait. We're making incremental progress. These children only have one chance to grow up. We can't wait another generation to try to improve our educational system. You know, we actually are saving taxpayers money. We reduce the dropout rate. We're boosting test scores. Studies have shown if you want to drop teenage pregnancy rates, if you want to reduce poverty rates, if you want to improve your economy, it comes back to making sure children have a great education. So who could be against these reforms and these results? The teacher unions. This is actually a little quote from one of the teacher union leaders in Louisiana. They said this. They said, parents don't have a clue when it comes to making educational choices for their kids. I can't find anything more offensive. To me, that summarizes the difference between the left's approach and our approach. Not only to education, but to government, to living our lives. You either believe, the reason I'm a conservative, you either believe that government knows best and they can plan your lives and make your decisions for you. They're going to tell you what foods your children should eat. They're going to tell you how to spend your money. They're going to tell you how to get your health care. They're going to tell you how to live your lives. Or, like we believe, that we are better when we're governed from the bottom up. You trust the American people. The Founding Fathers didn't trust a bunch of elitists living in D.C. They trusted the American people to make those decisions. And what more important decision is there than how you want to raise your, educate, and train your, and teach your own children? Why should the government bureaucrats and the union leaders make that decision instead of you? But I'll tell you this, it's not just about statistics and numbers. I'll close with just a quick story. I remember meeting a single mom in New Orleans East, that's north of the Ninth Ward, had been devastated by Hurricane Katrina. We're at a parochial school, and she'd come to meet me, and she was not dressed real well, and she was really nervous, and I finally took her aside to visit with her to find out what she wanted. It turns out her little girl went to that school thanks to the voucher, the scholarship program that we had created. And she had tears in her eyes. She told me her story. She said her mom had gotten pregnant as a teenager, had gone on welfare, and had her. She had gotten pregnant as a teenager, had gone on welfare, and had this little girl that was with her now. She was working 3 jobs so that her little girl could get a better education. And she basically told me through her tears she didn't want her daughter to make the same mistakes she had made. She didn't want her daughter to get pregnant as a teenager, go on welfare. She wanted to have a better life. And she was telling me without the scholarship program that we had created, her daughter wouldn't have been able to, and she wasn't even Catholic, but she just knew that her daughter, this was the first time her daughter had ever brought home homework. It was the first time her daughter had ever gone to a school that had supplies like toilet paper in the bathroom or paper and pencils in the classrooms. It was the first time her daughter had worn uniforms, felt safe, first time her daughter was thinking about staying in school beyond elementary and middle school and high school. This young mom didn't care about politics or Democrats or Republicans or teacher unions. She just wanted to rescue her daughter. To me, that's the American dream. Sacrificing so our children can do better than we did. Now, I'll tell you the kicker on this. I know where this woman came from. It's a district that votes 99.9% Democrat. She didn't vote for me. If she did, she voted for me by mistake. She pushed the wrong button when she went in there. But to me, this shouldn't be a partisan issue. This is really about giving parents the ability to make decisions for their own children and giving every child in America the opportunity to get the best education, have a chance to pursue the American dream. We're either an aspirational society, like we conservatives believe, or we go down the path of Bernie Sanders, we become more of a big government socialist society where government takes care of everybody. You and I know that's not sustainable, and that's why I think education reform is so important for the Republican Party, for conservatives, but also for our country.
Now, Governor Richardson, this crowd may not know, but when you were governor of New Mexico, you slashed the top rate for state income tax by 40%, and you cut capital gains, and you created more than 75,000 jobs. Can you talk to us why you thought that was important and why you thought that was a success?
Well, I want to tell you that I've always considered myself a pro-business Democrat because I think the key to being a governor is to create jobs. And, you know, Bobby and Rick have done very well there. And I saw my state, we're a small state. I saw Colorado, Texas, Arizona with economic growth, with strategies. But they also had much lower state income tax and capital gains. So my first year with a Democratic legislature, we went from 9 state income tax percent to 3.9, and we went half of the capital gains tax. So what happened next? We attracted a lot of movies, A lot of movies are made in New Mexico, Louisiana, Texas too. But we basically said to the movie companies, if you come and create our jobs, and you come and make movies here, we'll invest with you, we'll give you tax incentives, we'll give you free land, we'll give you dinners at the governor's mansion every night. No, we didn't do that. And then renewable energy, solar, wind. And I know that Kern County, right guy here, Kevin was telling me you're the biggest oil and gas producing county in America. I didn't know that. I thought it was Texas or Louisiana. But my point there is that, you know, you have a good balance of economic growth. You've also, I know, Kevin, you may want to touch on this later, but I want to also just conclude with, like my colleagues, I ran for president. And in Iowa, those tax-cutting policies, I want to tell you, with the electorate in Iowa, were not very popular. But I will say to you that I recently saw Vice President Biden, who was razzing me about something, you know, my hair was a mess or something. And I said, now, Mr. Vice President Joe, you know, I beat you in Iowa. And he says, yeah, but I'm vice president.
Look, this could be a presidential debate. All three of these men stood on that stage. All three of these men are still young enough to try it again. All three of you are successful. America has a history of normally electing governors, but this seems like a different climate than we've ever seen before. That, like, experience somehow is a negative in this campaign. Country divided. To be honest with everyone, no one likes either party. What advice, knowing what you have gone through, because no one in this room has done that. We all watch from TV and we think it's easy. They don't know the questions you get asked, the campaign, the hours that you put in, and the challenges in what you see. Knowing that we're down to 2 right now, there's a number of others, what advice would you give those 2 individuals, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, today going into the last 5 weeks of this campaign, knowing that whoever wins has to unite this country as well?
Now, one of these individuals is going to have the extraordinary task of leading the free world and to get our country back on track. And there's a lot of experience on this stage, including Kevin. But from an executive standpoint, the piece of advice that I would give the next president of the United States is to truly understand and respect the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution, that Bill of Rights, that basically says that the federal government is supposed to do a few things. Do those few things really, really well. And everything else is reserved for the states or to the individuals. And that is the greatest piece of advice. If we really want to see America become this powerful economic juggernaut again, if we want this country to be what it can be and should be, allow those 50 laboratories of innovation to compete against each other. I'll promise you that Bill Richardson and his predecessors, Bobby Jindal and his predecessors, the predecessors in all of the other 47 states not represented on this stage, will go out there and make the best decisions for their citizens rather than bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. So that would be my piece of advice, Kevin, to just straight up respect that 10th Amendment, let these states compete, they'll make the best decisions, and America will be stronger because of it.
Bobby, what's your advice to him?
First of all, I certainly echo everything that Rick said. I should have said this earlier. It is a great honor to be sitting here, standing up here with these 2 governors as well. I am biased towards governors when it comes to future presidents. I think they've run things. I think they've got a proven track record. My overall, and I've got very specific advice for both the candidates, my overall advice for both of them would be, look, I hope whoever gets, and I'm a Republican, obviously, but I hope that our next president will take seriously the need to make big changes in our country. We don't just need incremental change. You know, Rick and I, we shared a lot of stages. We're good friends. We're good competitors, even before and after we ran for president against each other. And he and I would both tell folks, this is the most important election of our lifetimes. Now, politicians always say that, by the way. You never hear anybody say this is not an important election. But this time it's really, really true. I mean, if you think about the things we talked about on the campaign trail, the $19 trillion of debt, the creation of Obamacare, an EPA that's trying to strangle our domestic energy and manufacturing economies. When you think about the growth of the federal government in unprecedented ways to intrude into our lives, you think about our weakened foreign policy, how our enemies don't fear and respect us, our friends don't trust and rely on us. You look at what this president may do as he's leaving office to Israel and what he might send as a signal to our allies, not only in the Middle East, but around the world. You think about the growing dependence on government, the growing size of government. You think about the obligations we've left to our children and grandchildren. We don't need somebody to go to D.C. and just make incremental change. We either really mean it, that we're serious about saving the American dream. We either really mean it, that we don't want to be the last generation that actually left our children fewer. We don't want to be the first generation that leaves our children fewer opportunities than those we inherited from our parents. And if we really mean all those things, we better be committed to making big changes. And you know what? Those big changes will make you unpopular with the New York Times and the Washington Post and the mainstream media, and that's okay. And you may not get invited to all the cocktail parties, and you may not be considered smart inside the Beltway, and that's okay. Because if we don't have big change inside of D.C., what I worry about is that, and I'm a complete optimist. Look, I think this is the greatest country in the history of the world. I think our best days are always ahead of us. But what I worry about is at some point you cross a tipping point where we become more like Europe, where you really do have this once great country looking at a very slow but gradual decline. And I don't want to see that future for our country. And I don't think that's the future any of us want for our children. I don't think that's inevitable, by the way. So I do think this is an important election. I'm not one of these that says, oh, look, if we elect the wrong person, the country is doomed. Our country is bigger than that. The genius of our country is in the people, not our government leaders. But I do think that we need somebody to go in there and make big changes. One of the things I got on the campaign trail is that people were frustrated with leaders in both parties, of saying one thing and then doing another thing when they get elected. It doesn't seem like it makes much of a difference if the Republicans are in charge or Democrats in charge. Government still keeps on growing. Things don't get better. And that's why our next president better be serious about growing the economy again and shrinking the government. In terms of the specific advice, you know, I tell Donald Trump, look, if you watch the last debate, this election, both of them, this election is not about them. It's about us. She is going to needle him and try to get underneath his skin. It can't be about that. And for her, she's got to stop playing prevent defense. I think she's gone to the witness protection program for the next 5 weeks. And she's just hoping nobody finds her or asks her a question or puts a microphone in her face. I want to see both of these candidates play proactive offense and tell us how they're going to make our lives better by shrinking the size of government. I don't need government to take care of me. I'm not saying that I want them to promise me more, quote, free stuff that we're going to pay for. But I want them to articulate a positive, optimistic, hopeful vision built on genuine conservative principles of limited government that says, you know what, our future is going to be brighter, and we can, as Americans, come together and solve these big problems. That may be too much to ask for, but I'll close with this final observation. I think voters are so tired of both these parties, if they don't produce results, I think a lot of them are going to be looking for new leadership, and they're going to be looking for, there'll be, I think, people remember 2010 as the big Tea Party-led movement. I think 2018 could be even bigger if we don't see big change from our leaders in D.C.
Bill?
Yeah. You know, I think Bobby and Rick have talked long range and vision and very articulate. I used to get criticized when I was governor because they said, well, Governor, what's the long-range goal here? What are you thinking long range? And I used to, when you were governor, you had a problem almost every day, every hour. I said, my policy is what am I going to do next week? So my solutions, what I'm just going to put forth, are short term, because I think long term, obviously it's going to depend on what happens in the Congress. We have a divided government. I think it's going to stay the same. The House is going to stay Republican. We have a chance in the Senate. I'm not sure we really do. In the presidency, you know, it's looking good for a continuation. But again, we don't know what the American people are going to do. So what I say is, and Kevin, you're a key player here. What short-term issues, short-term, whoever gets elected, can we focus on, at least to move forward? One, I mentioned national security. I mean, you know, partisanship should not happen in foreign policy. It should stop at the water's edge. I think we need a policy on North Korea. We need a policy on Syria. We need a policy on cybersecurity. I mean, you know, the Russians are probably going to decide this election. They've hacked the Democratic National Committee. I noticed they haven't hacked the Republican National Committee. But my point is that I think there's some potential areas of agreement. And one that is very good for you here is infrastructure. Both parties agree we need to rebuild our ports, our highways, our roads, our broadband, our electricity grid, green infrastructure. We need that. And I think there's bipartisan solutions. Both parties, either through pensions or tax incentives, can come together. Another issue is we're losing jobs. And I'm a free trader. I'm for NAFTA. And I'm for the Pacific Trade Agreement. I think they're good. But we've lost jobs overseas, and somehow we got to get manufacturing going again. And those companies that are putting those jobs overseas, we either have to figure a way to give them incentives to stay the jobs in America, or ways that those funds that they make overseas are invested in infrastructure and public-private partnerships. That's a secondary. Obviously, we need a jobs program in America. That is, we need to deal with Social Security and Medicare. These are long range, which I don't think there's potential for an agreement. I'm going to bring up one issue that hasn't come. That's immigration. Now, you guys have a huge Hispanic community here. Your state has the largest percentage, I think, of, well, no, New Mexico does, of Hispanics in your state. We need a bipartisan solution. It's not a Democrat or Republican solution. Now, you know, I know Rick had a good position on it. Bobby's realistic. You know, I'm half Hispanic. I'm half Hispanic. And by the way, I noticed that Sheriff Joe Arpaio is here. Don't tell him I'm here because I don't want to be deported, but don't tell him I'm here. I'm going to leave right after. But you know, what I'm saying here is we need a bipartisan effort that protects our borders with more technology, more border patrol, enforcing our law, but also a path to citizenship. There's 11 or 12 million in America that are living under the shadows. And many of you know them. They're working, they're patriotic, they're paying taxes. Yes, there's some bad elements there, but a path to citizenship for those, not automatic citizenship right away. In fact, it takes about 11 years after paying back taxes, no criminal record, and embracing American values, speaking English. You know, there's standards. And I will say this to you. I think President Obama's program on immigration was good. But the best one that I saw and that I was briefed on was by President George W. Bush. George W. Bush. He had a realistic plan, but his party didn't support him. And it was a plan that combined a path to citizenship with stronger border enforcement, with strong legal immigration measures that unblocked a lot of the red tape, that dealt with the H-1B visas. We have a lot of talented people that want to stay here, that are technology oriented. We need a wholesale bipartisan reform. Now, my worry is that Donald Trump has spooked the moderate Republicans, the realistic Republicans that are all over here, and my friends here. They don't get spooked, but my point is that I just think it's going to be difficult to come up with a compromise. But That, I think, is our most urgent domestic, non-economic issue that we need to handle. And I think here in Kern County, with your ability to bring people together, you know, here, this is a conservative community, Second Amendment, I'm Second Amendment, space, Hispanics, economic growth, I think you can help lead. And Kevin, my last point, Congress. When I was in Congress, Congressman Bill Thomas and I, your ex-congressman, are you here, Bill? Nah, he's not going to listen to me. But we used to get along. You know why we got along? Because we used to do things together. We used to go to meals together. Our families would get together. We'd travel together. We got to know each other. Because the congressional schedule was such that we would start voting on Monday night and we would leave on Thursday. So you had to get to know each other. Now, and the reason I say this is you're a majority leader. In my day, the majority leader controlled the schedule. You still do?
Yes.
Well, you know, you should extend the schedule so that members get to know each other. Because right now the division is such that you go on cable TV, you got to be negative, you got to raise money through the internet. That's the only way to do it, being negative. But I think if members got to know each other better, just simple human contact. Like, you know, with Rick and I, we had a water problem, we had an immigration problem, we had something, we'd call, hey, Rick, you know, can we fix this? Yeah. All right, let's do it. You know, with Bobby, less so, because Louisiana is a little farther. But this is what I think is needed, Ked. And I know it has to go both sides, but some way to bring the humanity, the human contact, the getting to know each other. Everything is now iPhones, it's Twitter, it's, you know, just having people get to know each other. And you can play a very important role. And I know you're a bridge builder and you're a good guy. So get on this, will you?
I thought that was advice for the people running for president, but I'll take it. That's good advice. All right. I don't want you to think partisan. I want you to think about the knowledge of what you had from what you've done in your lifetime. And I want you to tell us the one issue that keeps you up at night, that you get nervous about looking towards the future, more so as a father, more so as a husband, more so as someone who loves this country. I want to start with you, Bill.
Well, it's because I spend so much time on national security. I mean, look, domestic terrorism, we've got to make sure these visa laws are tightened so we don't get unsavory. I recognize that, and we're not doing as well as we should. I worry about a domestic terrorist attack like 9/11. I think we have to have political unity when that happens. We don't have it. I worry again about North Korea. I worry that this is a country with 21 nuclear weapons, with missiles. We've got 28,000 American troops on the DMZ. The national security situation with ISIS in the Middle East, the Syrian problem right now, it looks like the ceasefire is falling apart. You know, we need some dramatic leadership. We need leaders that really in Europe, all around the world, are ready to tackle these problems. So it's national security that worries me, and the need also. I think of those 11 million undocumented workers that are here, that are good people, that are afraid to come out, but they're contributing. And they deserve an answer. They deserve a solution. They're not going to get deported. That's not going to happen. Where are you going to round them up? Right here? 11 million? Throw them? That's not going to happen. So let's be realistic. Let's be Americans. Let's unify this country around tough issues.
Bobby, the one item to you personally with your knowledge.
Yeah, there are a lot of issues that threaten America today, whether it's foreign enemies or I actually think I'm actually very confident that America can beat any enemy that comes against us. Look, I don't think we're taking the threat of radical Islamic terrorism as seriously as we should. I don't think we're staying with Israel like we should. I don't think we're standing up to Russia and China like we should. But what really worries me is not an external threat. I don't think anybody will ever take away our unique form of government, our freedoms, our heritage. What I worry about is that we give it away. I don't think anybody can take it away, but I think we're perfectly capable of giving it away. And what do I mean by that? Look, this is a very famous quote. I'm going to quote Ronald Reagan when he said that we're always one generation away from losing that freedom. In other words, every generation has got to choose for themselves to renew those principles of freedom and limited government. It's not that it's inscribed in our DNA. It's not in our soul. What makes America great is not our natural resources or these great oceans or even our incredible economy or our incredible military, and I'm very grateful for the men and women in our military. What really has made America unique and great throughout all these years is the Founding Fathers understood what they were doing. They created a limited government not to give us, but rather to protect our God-given rights. And I tell you, you ask me, not only as a former governor, but also as a husband and as a father, I worry about the coarsening of our culture. And I worry that it's our responsibility to teach each generation to pass along those lessons we learned. And these didn't used to be partisan lessons. These aren't Republican lessons or Democratic lessons. These ideas of hard work, of delayed gratification. This idea that, we live in a culture today where people are more famous for being famous rather than for actual accomplishment. And I don't know about you, I want my young kids, we had a bad summer of violence. I teach my young kids, my wife and I, we teach our young kids to look up to those men and women, whether in uniform, whether they're military or first responders, police, or others that run towards danger, not away from it so that we can be safe. And so I'd rather, instead of obsessing about what celebrity did what yesterday or who broke up with whom, or I just think that if we really, the thing that
we have, because there's a really small percentage of our country that sacrificially serves us every day. Of course, I'm speaking about the young men and women who wear the uniform of this country. There are literally tens of thousands of them that come home. You realize we've been at war for over a decade. Bill, we have ground up an entire generation of young men and women who have served sacrificially for this country. And too many of them that we promised we would give health care to, that we would take care of them, that we would honor their service and sacrifice. And we as a country are failing. My great concern is the next president of the United States doesn't understand that to the core of their soul. And that we will fail them and in turn send a message to the next generation that if you decide to serve this country, to uphold those values and the tradition of America, that we're not going to take care of you. And my greatest concern for this country is that we as a people fail to rise up and to send a clear message to the next President of the United States, the next generation of men and women that are going to run this country, whether it's at the Department of Defense or whether it's at the Veterans Administration, that we no longer will accept failure in that we
and are serving in the university, but have served our country as well. And I'm very proud to be an alumni from Cal State Bakersfield. Let's give a round of applause to these three gentlemen, and I want to thank you for your service to the country, and I want to challenge you to stay involved and be a part of this solution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, fellas. Wonderful panel. Kevin?